Anyway, you're watching The World Today. Glad you could join us on the programme today. We're going to bring you today's perspective. And it happened 40 years ago, but it is still considered to be the world's worst ever industrial accident. Thousands of people were killed in the central Indian city of Bhopal in December 1984 after breathing in poisonous gas leaked from the Union Carbide pesticides factory. Now, according to government estimates, around 3,500 people died within days of the gas leak, more than 15,000, though, in the years since. Activists, though, say that death toll much higher. Well, joining me here on set is Rachna Dhingra. She's coordinator of the International Campaign for Justice in Bhopal, and also Satinath Sarangi, who's managing trustee of the Sambhava Trust. Thanks very much to both of you for coming in and talking to us. Satinath, I want to start with you because I know that you actually arrived in Bhopal just the day after the accident. I mean, for our viewers who may not remember what happened in Bhopal, and obviously for those who don't remember the full experience of what it must have been like, tell us what it was like.
Little after midnight of 2nd, 3rd December 1984, about 27 tons of methyl isocyanate, a poisonous chemical about 500 times more poisonous than hydrogen cyanide. It leaked from a 100 feet high vent and descended on a thickly populated shanty town right next to the factory. The factory was deliberately under-designed. It was run recklessly, and because of cost cutting, it was made more unsafe than it already was. It was located in the middle of dense population. The gases descended because it was heavier, and there was a poison cloud that descended on the people's homes. It entered the homes because these were clay and daub houses, and people got up choking and with stinging in their ears, and they didn't know where to go, so they ran towards the hospital, which was to the south, and unfortunately that was also the direction of the wind. So they ran through the thick, dense cloud, and thousands died that night. But people who died that night consider the dead to be lucky because what they suffered and are suffering today.
So what was it like for you being there just the day after? It must have been an horrific experience.
For me, I've never been so helpless in my life because I did not know how big it was or how problematic it was. I landed and I saw that everything was empty, but I saw thousands of people in miserable condition and no one knowing what to do, no one really knowing what to do. And that was the most painful and helpless part. So all I did was took people, carried them to the vehicles that were passing by so that they could be reached to the hospital.
And Rachna, as Satinath said there, I mean, the number of people who died is just incredible, isn't it, to imagine?
Yeah. It's not just, so far 23,000 people have died, more than that, as a result of gas exposure-related illnesses. But even today, people continue to die due to MIC exposure-related problems. The rates of cancers are 10 times higher. In the pandemic, we lost many more gas victims, 4 times more gas victims than those who were not exposed to this gas. There is multi-system injuries, and it continues to kill people even today. And in addition to the ongoing gas disaster, there is an environmental disaster that continues to unfold. Union Carbide was bought by another chemical corporation called Dow Chemical, and in 2001, Dow Chemical took over Union Carbide knowing that they have not cleaned up its toxic waste, that there are still people that need to be paid compensation. And today, in the city of Bhopal, there are about 200,000 people who live around the abandoned factory where their groundwater and soil is contaminated by persistent organic pollutants, heavy metals, and pesticides.
Yeah, we're seeing in these images here some of the protests that have been held over the years, people blaming the company and blaming the authorities for not doing enough. And as you say, hundreds of tons of toxic waste is still being removed from the site, isn't it?
It's still sitting in the site, around the site, and it has contaminated the groundwater of up to 3.5 kilometers away from the factory. And the corporation responsible for this, responsible for the cleanup, cleanup, continues to say that they are an American corporation and they will not abide by the jurisdiction of Indian courts. So we are in a situation in Bhopal where 40 years later, 3 disasters continue to unfold. The gas disaster, which is still killing people, the next generation that is being born with all sorts of birth defects, and the ongoing environmental disaster and the health disaster later. So 40 years later, people are still sick, dying, and a new generation is being disabled due to lack of corporate accountability by Dow and Union Carbide.
I mean, there have been some, for example, an Indian court convicted, and they 7 managers that applied. There have been some fines, some prison sentences, but people say that it's just really a drop in the ocean compared to what's really needed to try and bring justice to people.
What is, if you go into the facts of the case, it is very evident that the factory in Bhopal was deliberately underdesigned. It was, compared to its US factory, there was 30% cost cutting. There is enough evidence to show that the carbide management knew that a disaster was building, and yet they did nothing just to save on profits. So if this isn't a corporate crime, then what is? And we know that corporate crime is hardly ever prosecuted, let alone convicted. In this case, all that has happened is the charges have been diluted, the criminal charges have been diluted, so that this huge massacre, this corporate massacre, has been turned into something like a car accident, only of negligence, which is quite clear it was much more than negligence. It was deliberate, and that's why it was a crime. And this crime continues to go unpunished. And because of this, so many other corporations are getting encouraged to continue with their crimes and killing people, even in Bhopal. There was a clinical trial by multinational pharmaceutical corporations without telling the people there, without telling the victims who are being tried on. And 13 people have died, that is officially known. We don't know how many more.
And both of you are here in France to talk to people at various different talks, different organisations. Why do you feel that that's important to do that?
Because, as you said, Bhopal happened 40 years ago, and most people think that this is something that happened in the past. We want the people of this world to know, and especially people in France to know, that this disaster continues to unfold and continues to kill and disable and contaminate the environment in Bhopal even today. And there are similar silent Bhopal-like disasters even in France. We visited Lubrizol plant where there was a massive fire in 2019. And people, so we want to extend our solidarity to people who are also fighting these corporate criminals in other parts of the world, but also people to know, one, that Dow Chemical has big businesses in France, and they should seek accountability on behalf of Bhopal people, but to also know that Bhopal is a continuing disaster, and it is only a power of ordinary people that can force Dow Chemical and Union Carbide to end the disaster in Bhopal.
Well, good to talk about it here on the programme today. Thank you very much to both of you for coming in. Rachna Dhingra, coordinator of the International Campaign for Justice in Bhopal, and also Satinath Sarangi, managing trustee of the Sab Harbour Trust. Thanks very much once again to both of you here on France 24.